run the graphic, the graphic that we normally run for the countdown. So I'm going to do that really quick just to maintain our normal flow. Hang on just a second. Good afternoon, everyone. Patrick Brenner here, president of the Southwest Public Policy Institute. Before we dive into our discussion today about expanding educational opportunities, I wanted to do a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, I have some really exciting news. SPPI was selected as a grant recipient of Atlas Network's Think Tank Startup Fund. So we're very excited about that. I'm hoping that that's going to open up a lot of doors for us, and we're very excited to be working with Atlas Network in a direct way. Also, because I am me, we got to do the Happy 4th of July, everybody. Since we're not going to be engaged with you on the 4th of July, got to get those historical hats in, as always. And gosh, let's just dive right in. Today we're joined by our very special guest, Shawn Peterson, and there was a great article, Shawn, that just showed up in Fox News recently, where we had great analysis from Michael Hartney and Corey DeAngelis. What the shocking nation's report card scores reveal about Catholic schools. And this dives into a lot of detail about the National Assessment of Educational Progress data associated with test scores for Catholic schools, primarily being in session, in person, throughout the pandemic, and the impact that had on Catholic schools versus public schools, which were primarily closed. So I'm going to hand it over to Shawn and Dowd Muska, our Vice President of Research at the Southwest Public Policy Institute. Let's take it away, and let's talk about the personal stories here that Dowd and I both share as products of the Catholic education system. I went to, what was it, first, second, third, and fourth grade. I was in private Catholic elementary school, and was lucky enough to have the teaching and guidance of several amazing teachers. I remember my third grade teacher, Sister Maureen. She was married to a was it Sister Maureen? No, it was Mrs. Groves. Mrs. Groves was my first grade teacher. She was married to Father Justin. He was a Russian Orthodox priest and was obsessed with the Titanic. He and I shared that in common. It was really, really neat. But third grade teacher was Sister Maureen, and the principal of that school was Sister Murray. That was in Vacaville, California. I remember those days fondly because fourth grade ends and I go back into the public school system in Fairfield, or maybe it was Vacaville. I can't remember. Vandenberg High School, something like that. Gosh, and in once we moved back into public school, they didn't know what to do with us. Like myself and my siblings, they really didn't know what to do with us because we were doing geometry. We knew our long division. We didn't have to worry about the multiplication tables that they were working on at that point. I think that was fifth grade. So much so that I was so frustrated that my parents decided to take me out of the public school system and dump me in a charter school, which was self-driven, self-motivated homeschool for a long while. It was a good experience, as I recollect. So that was my experience, and I remember it fondly. I got whacked on the knuckles a couple of times, and oh boy, did I deserve it. So Dowd and Shawn, take it away.
Thank you, Patrick. I guess one might say that the Catholic education system can either get the credit or the blame for the employees of the Southwest Public Policy Institute, and then I guess it depends on what your
Yeah.
perspective is. We're going to get right to Shawn very quickly. I just wanted to inject a little bit of a historical perspective as we begin. Patrick, one of the great things about having one guest on our TV broadcast on Fridays is you can really get into a lot more detail than you can with a panel of three. Not that I'm bashing panels of three, but this affords us an opportunity to do a little historical background. I'm going to give you the numbers on Catholic education in the United States. The federal numbers that I could find, the most recent or the farthest back, were for the 1919-1920 school year, where about 1.9 million students were enrolled in Catholic education in the country. The peak appears to be around, not surprisingly, when a Catholic was elected president for the first time in the United States in the fall of 1960. Federal data show 5.2 million students enrolled in Catholic schools K through 12. The most important year in Catholic education, the year I graduated from East Catholic High School in Manchester, Connecticut, 1993, 1994. That number had fallen to 2.5 million. And that's more than half of a loss from the peak of 1960. 20 years later, 2013, 2014, 1.97 million, according to the National Catholic Educational Association. For the current, just ended school year, we were at 1.69 million. Shawn, the from Catholic Education Partners, Arthur Schlesinger Sr. once said that the prejudice against the Catholic Church was, quote, the deepest bias in the history of the American people. United States early days, not so much of a Catholic country. Catholics came to this country in the mid 19th century by the tens of millions by between then and the 1920s, and faced a lot of hostility. And a part of that response was building a large, robust system of Catholic schools from coast to coast. Start us in with the historical perspective on the church's schools and the role they've played in American education.
Sure. I'll be happy to, Dowd. And I got nervous for a minute when Patrick said that Sister Maureen was married, and then he
that sounded not right.
I thought, oh boy, you sure that wasn't 2023?
One of those really liberal Catholic schools, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've got none is married, maybe he wasn't in the Catholic school he thought he was. So no, thanks. Great to be with you guys today, and pleasure to be here, and always love talking about this topic. Yeah, I mean, some really, just as we approach Independence Day, if anybody there's a guy named, the only signer of the Declaration of Independence was Mr. Carroll of Carrollton,
Yep.
Whose brother, by the way, became the first bishop in the United States to have a diocese, John Carroll. And George Washington has a very famous speech that he gave from near Mr. Carroll's home, and he gave most of a significant amount of money to support the troops, even though in certain places Catholics actually couldn't run for office or vote or anything else. But Washington says without his funds, we would not have been able to become independent. So long history of Catholic support and involvement in America. And the Catholic school system, you're right, was mostly began because the group of bishops in the 1800s were very concerned about Catholic school children going to government schools, public schools, what they used to be called common schools, because they were all similar, but that they were going to lose their faith. It wasn't about the education they might receive or other things. It was really because the King James Bible was used, Protestant prayers were recited. In fact, there's a very famous case of his name escapes me, but a young boy was actually severely beaten because he refused to recite Protestant prayers in schools. And so the bishops wrote to the Pope at that time and said, will you allow us to create an American Catholic school system to keep our kids from losing their faith in the mostly Protestant schools, which were heavily Protestant until the 1960s. You still had the Protestant Bible and prayers and everything else in public schools until the 1960s. So, and as you said, that's kind of a watershed moment. 1965 is actually the high point of Catholic education in America. We had over 6 million kids. And then, kind of started to decline a little bit. Part of that was actually because John F. Kennedy was elected president. And I think there was a feeling that maybe we had arrived, or that we were kind of considered fully American at that point. And so a lot of parents decided to maybe, check out the government school system again and kind of, if you will, become more American, or whatever they thought that meant. So, but I will also say this, there were Catholic schools in North America, in what is now the United States, a good 100 years before the Declaration of Independence was even signed. So long history.
Yeah, I believe there's one historical reference to a school founded, I don't know if it was the Jesuits or some Catholic entity in what is now Florida. I think it was 1606. I mean, so
Yep,
our people have been here for a long time. Okay, we may not have been dominant at the founding, but Catholics have played a role here, and we probably will continue to play a role. But you're so right about that prejudice. And I was going to, I know that the Catholic League and Bill Donahue has, he may have his detractors and his fans. We won't get into that,
Yep.
but his organization, and I'll read the quote: the dominant government schools in the 19th century were subtle and sometimes not very subtle tools for evangelizing the growing Irish Catholic immigrant population. And I'm mostly Irish, come from, we go back to the mid 19th century, potato famine and all that. Anti-Catholic sentiments extended throughout the curriculum with references to deceitful Catholics, murderous inquisitions, vile popery, church corruption, conniving Jesuits, and the Pope as the Antichrist of Revelation. Really interesting stuff. Lots of anti-Catholic tracts were circulating, newspaper editorials portraying Catholic schools as anti-Bible, anti-American, and set on raiding the public till to bring about the destruction of the public school system. One of the reasons personally I tend to be pro-immigration is I do think that America is an immigration machine, assimilation machine, and it may not happen with the immediate generation, but in subsequent generations, the melting pot does become a melting pot where we preserve most of the good stuff, and a lot of the fractiousness sort of fades away. So it amuses me to hear about my ancestors, Slovak Catholics and Irish Catholics, being told they couldn't become Americans. I think a lot of my siblings and cousins who are my age would find that, in my generation would find that very amusing all these years later. And maybe people who are making those kind of comments today should rethink what they're saying about the immigrants coming to America today. But that's just an editorial comment on my part. It's almost like everything old is becoming new again. I think people are looking for education alternatives, Shawn, because of the modern religion of secular progressivism, cultural Marxism, economic Marxism, a lot of these gender and sexual issues. We had lockdown in which children weren't allowed to go to school, and we have had this explosion. We will get into all the various school choice legislation, but we're experiencing this kind of watershed moment in terms of the interest in American parents in whether they were forced into it or whether they're just coming to it on their own, looking at alternatives. What are you folks in the Catholic education world seeing in terms of whether it's Catholics themselves or even people who are just exploring all the options? It's kind of good is coming out of bad, I would say, certainly in the case of Catholic education and any alternative, where people are starting to finally look around more and say, hey, maybe the local government school in my zip code is not the choice for my kids.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, for a variety of reasons, we're seeing an explosion in a lot of places. Like, Florida is just off the charts for Catholic education and growth. I think there's been 10 states that have had growth in Catholic education. Definitely Florida is one of them. So very excited about that. And I think there's a variety of reasons. I think we always have to be careful that we sort of assume what parents are, why they're making these choices. But we definitely know from some polling and from comments that we've gotten from, parents and what they're saying generally. There's a wide variety of reason. COVID was definitely, again, as you say, bring some good out of bad. COVID was definitely horrible. But it sort of opened parents' eyes a little bit to the government school system, to the unions trying to keep them shuttered, even though they could safely open. A lot of private schools safely opened. They went back in person, and they did their job. I mean, just like cops and firefighters and people at the grocery store and others went back and did their job for the good of the country. A lot of, I think teachers unions, not individual teachers, but teacher unions and public schools did themselves a great disservice. They always talk about how they're kind of this essential building block of America, yet they basically told us that they could be closed for a year and a half. So, without really any effect. And we've seen that now with the NAEP scores. And we certainly don't want to do, as Catholic schools, I'm very proud Catholic schools, for the most part, went back. They did their job. They educated children in person. And the test scores are showing that. We always want to be careful, though, we don't take a victory lap. We can highlight our success. We never want to take a victory lap on this issue, though, because we have to remember at the end of every one of those really bad test scores, there's a child. And there's millions of children in America that were not served well by the government school, and by them getting pressure from national groups in Washington to stay closed. So, but I think and then I think another thing that just, we can't avoid the topic. A lot of parents are very disturbed by the wokeness that's going on in the government schools right now. And a lot of parents do not agree with this, and they want different options for their kids. They want, yes, a great education, but they want to get their kids away from some bad things as much as they want to go towards some good things. As I was talking to someone yesterday, and we were sort of saying that, it used to be that Catholics wanted to get their kids out of the government schools because they didn't want them coming home Protestant per se. Now you have to worry about Johnny going to school, and coming home as Jane. So, there's a lot of reasons why I think people are choosing Catholic schools. They've always been great educationally, and they're doing well there. But I think it's also, if Catholic schools aren't primarily passing on the faith and morals and those things, then they're not doing their job. But we also have to obviously provide a great education. And I think we do that really, really well. I think that is the Catholic school advantage. That is historically something we can be really proud of that we're doing.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough in terms of my Catholic education, and we don't really need to get into my views on religion right now, but the moral aspect of that, I hope we have time to get into it, because one of the greatest things that bothers me about contemporary American life is people just don't seem to care about the ethical consequences of their behavior in our country. And I think maybe more than anything else, a Catholic education did for me is it really inculcated this notion of thinking about the consequences of your actions, and whether it's your relationship to God or your relationship to your fellow man. It's a wonderful thing that the church, and I'm going to say this in a positive sense, really drills into you. We have these ethical debates, and we discuss the parables, Jesus's parables, and those sorts of things. I think that would benefit any human being, whatever you ultimately become as an adult, whether you maintain your religious faith or not. Folks, weigh in with your comments on your platform. As usual, Patrick has us up on 19 different Silicon Valley platforms. We really appreciate your comments and your questions. I'll just interject here and say that the Southwest Public Policy Institute is not a Catholic organization. It just sort of happened that Patrick and I had Catholic educations, and we are going to be getting into the broader school choice debate here. And someday, my nephew just graduated a couple weeks ago. I was back east for his graduation at a Waldorf facility, which is, of course, based on the German, Austrian Rudolf Steiner model. And we could get into Montessori education. The options that are out there are pretty amazing, and I think good parents look into them. But Shawn, the demographics and I guess maybe some of the statistics about the current state of Catholic education in the country, in terms of what kinds of kids are you educating? What's the sort of size of the typical Catholic school today? What's the class size? What are the teachers like? Just kind of an overview, because I think people from outside of the Catholic world probably, this is an alien entity to them. Just sort of the basics of where Catholic education stands in 2023.
Yeah. So, to piggyback on something you just said, I think what's interesting about Catholic schools is a lot of people who aren't Catholic choose Catholic schools.
Indeed.
And so I think that really speaks volume. You know, we've gotten a lot of attacks from certain places right now while we're trying to get education choice, parental choice passed, that, oh, you know, I keep hearing the word indoctrination. It's like, well, okay, but a lot of non-Catholics are choosing Catholic schools. And so they're, again, they know that Catholic teaching goes with it. And so they're obviously willing to accept that, or, you know, want to be, you know, are fine with that having been taught to their children while they're getting that great education. And so, I mean, you know, when you've got Muslim families choosing Catholic schools, you've got Jewish families choosing Catholic schools, obviously Protestants, people of no faith, they're willing to, you know, sign on the dotted line to say, yeah, you know, my child can learn about the Catholic faith, but I know they're going to get a great education. So that's a big growing demographic of non-Catholics are coming to Catholic schools. Then you've got in a lot of inner cities and bigger cities, you've got a growing African American population, because they see the achievement gap in government schools, and they don't see that achievement gap a lot of times in Catholic schools. Now, is there an achievement gap? Yeah, everywhere has an achievement gap, but the achievement gap is so narrow in Catholic schools, and it just doesn't really seem to matter what your background is. If you're from a poor family or a rich family, if you're, you know, from Black family, a white family, Hispanic family, Asian family, whatever it is, Catholic education provides you a great education. Now, do we have a teacher shortage just like government schools do? Yes, I think there's less people going to teaching. But we have, you know, like Tom Carroll in Boston, superintendent of the Boston schools, Boston Diocese. He's doing amazing work recruiting young, vibrant Catholic, very Catholic teachers to his diocese. So you've got people out there doing amazing things like that to solve some of those problems. You know, we want more in Florida. To talk about Florida, there's going to be a report coming out, a study coming out very soon on Florida and Catholic education. They're just knocking it out of the park with African American families, with Hispanic families, with non-Catholic families, bringing them into the schools. And so there's a real renaissance going on in Catholic education and a renewal. But we're able to serve the poor. We're able to. I'll give you a quick example. Just in my home state of Minnesota, there's a wonderful school in Minneapolis, Ascension Grade School. It's K-8 Catholic, and they are in the heart of Minneapolis, in a very northeast Minneapolis, rough neighborhood. They're 4 blocks from the traditional public school, and their numbers are off the charts. Very high majority poverty, majority minority kids, and 100% of their kids graduate from 8th grade on time. 100% of those kids go to high school. 100% of those kids, as opposed to 54% of their peers, graduate from the public high school in 4 years. And 89% of those kids go on to college. So same demographics, same neighborhood, same problems at home, lots of single moms raising kids, drug issue, all kinds of stuff. You know, these are not cream of the crop, as they say. You know, we're not skimming off the top or picking our students for schools like that. And these schools are obviously Christ-centered, student-centered, and they're just doing amazing stories. And that's one story out of 1,000. And so, you know, super proud of schools like that.
Sure, and I think that skimming the cream argument has been around for a long time, and it's always been very, very shaky, very, very hollow. Talked about the kids. Talk about the teachers, and what I would say is the lower amount of administrators at Catholic schools compared to their partners on the government side. Talk about the teachers, and it seems to me that in all private education, Catholic included, I mean, you've got a broader perspective, I probably get in trouble if I talk about my views on most government school teachers. These are people, I would say, in terms of diversity in all the ways that matter, not just a very limited way, but in terms of whether what they, what their personal backgrounds are. They did not. Most of these people working in Catholic schools don't see their role as getting their annual raise, belonging to the union, preserving job security at all costs, jumping through all the various certification and regulatory hurdles that you need to do to continue to get hired and then continue in government education. It's just a different class of people. Boy, did I have a broad range of more women than men, but a pretty good mix of people with different perspectives and backgrounds teaching me through my time. And actually didn't even have anywhere near a majority of priests or nuns teaching me back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. They were lay people. Talk about the difference between the adults in these schools and the adults that may be more attracted to government employment.
Well, and obviously, the cost to educate is, similar to a government school, the actual cost to parents is much lower. Catholic schools try to keep that cost down with donations from the parish and the diocese and generous philanthropists. And so, because there is less money in the till, as they say, there is unfortunately less. Teachers are not paid as high in Catholic schools, and I wish they were, because they're amazing, and we've got a lot of amazing public school teachers. I never like to attack public school teachers because they've got a hard job, and I think there's many tens of thousands that are wonderful. But yeah, it is a difference. You've got to make choices when you only have, when you don't automatically have this huge budget coming from the government, when you don't have your building paid for, when you don't have to always worry about putting the new roof on or buying textbooks, making these choices. I think with that, I think a lot of Catholic teachers in Catholic schools, and again, some Catholic, some non-Catholic, some Jewish, some Protestant, all over the place. It's a real vocation for them because they know they are not going to make, they could make a lot more if they walk across the street to the government school. They know that they, could get tenure. They know they're going to get better benefits and retirement. And, they're probably not going to get dirty looks sometimes from their fellow teachers or from their neighbors for, teaching at the Catholic school. So I think there's a real dedication there with a lot of our teachers, and they do think of it as a vocation, not a job. And again, they went back. If you look at, I think it's in that Fox News article. It was interesting that was pointed out. There was this whole thing around. Well, a lot of older teachers were afraid to go back to school because of COVID, and I understand that, people with health issues. But if you look at the median age for Catholic teachers and other private schools, it's just as high or higher. So those people went back and taught, and part of it is for private schools. If you're not open, you're right. You don't get a tuition check for not doing your job, and parents were only going to put up with virtual so long. But I think there's a real dedication. We certainly used to see that with the sisters and the brothers and the priests and that taught really for free. But I think that dedication, that vocation is continued with our wonderful Catholic teachers that we have all across the country.
Certainly. How are Catholic schools responding to the digitization, the computer aspect of this? You read these articles about some of these districts, urban districts, that every child gets a tablet, and the technology aspect of this. My experience with Catholic education was much more meat and potatoes, bread and butter. They didn't really fall for all that sort of flash in the pan kind of stuff. But is it tough for Catholic schools to compete against the Olympic swimming pools and the free iPads and all that kind of stuff? And how how do they respond to that? I think it's tempting to look at all that huge amounts of money that flow into the government schools, but clearly all the bells and whistles are not translating into good test scores. So how is the church dealing with that?
Yeah, I think, there's a danger sometimes, and the church has to be careful of this too. Catholic schools have to be careful. You're not trying to keep up with the Joneses in areas that we shouldn't be looking to. We have to remember, Catholic schools have really led, and they've always been really good and consistent. And so we shouldn't be chasing a system and trying to replicate a system, the secular system, with, whether it be accreditation or licensure, or like you said, the bells and whistles, and everyone gets a personal device and all this kind of stuff. Yes, obviously it's 2023 and we have to have some technology, but the basics are the basics. If you get the basics wrong, it doesn't matter if you're doing it on the latest Apple device or whether you're doing it on a blackboard. If you get it wrong, it's wrong. And so we have to be careful about that. Now, do we have to have some of these things because the world is what it is, and we have to, we want to give our kids, access to those things to so they can compete? Absolutely. But when those things become sort of the mission, or when they become, the centerpiece, it all goes off the rails very quickly. I would say, the old thing used to be, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. When the new 3 letters become DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've lost your way, you've lost your mission. And so, again, maybe it's a blessing sometimes not to have money, to be able to do all the big extra things, and you have to focus on the essentials, because then maybe you really do focus on them. And so, blessing or curse, I guess people can decide that for themselves. But I think it also shows even well-off parents that were able to make that decision during COVID to move their child. They knew what they were getting. They knew driving by St. Margaret's or, St. Pius XII, whatever school, that it wasn't maybe the most up-to-date, beautiful, like you said, with the Olympic swimming pool. But they knew when their child was in that seat, in that desk, they were going to get a really good education. And they chose that over the new track, the new track, or the new stadium, or making sure every kid got an iPad.
Absolutely. And DEI, it seems to me, we had the first 3 R's, and then we had the second 3 R's, which were, I remember in the 90s, recycling, racism, and reproduction. Now DEI, I guess, is taking care of all those R's. We are talking to, Shawn is with us from Catholic Education Partners, based up in Minnesota. Talk a little bit about your specific organization and what it does, Shawn.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity again to be here. So our organization was really launched in 2017 and then really got off the ground in 2018. And it was actually started by a Nashville Dominican sister John Mary Fleming, who used to be she was at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. She was the executive director of the education committee there. And it was really her brainchild to start this organization, because she realized that, and I hate saying the word system, but outside of the government school system, the Catholic school system, if you will, across the country is really the largest provider, a brick and mortar provider of education outside that traditional public school system. And yet we didn't really have a national voice working, on behalf of our bishops, our state Catholic conferences, our Catholic superintendents, working with each of the states in coalitions that were getting these education choice bills passed. And some of the early ones, unfortunately, I think because our voice wasn't in the coalition room, wasn't helping with things like religious liberty language, some of the testing, some of the other things. Some of the early school choice bills, I would say, are not stellar, and we're actually trying to get some of those changed now. All the new bills that we've been helping with and working on, They have strong religious liberty protections for religious schools. We're not following all the nonsense of state testing. We certainly do testing. We do nationally normed reference tests. Almost every private school takes some kind of test like that. But we don't take the state test necessarily because it's apples to oranges. But so our mission is to work in coalition with state think tank groups, like Southwest Public Policy Institute, like Cardinal Institute in West Virginia, in every single state, American Federation for Children, Ed Choice, all these great groups that are bringing parents choice. We work with them, and we're the Catholic voice along with the Bishops' Conference in an individual state to really represent the church. And I'm very proud. I love to do this work every day, and we've had some great success, and I think gotten some good language and bills to protect religious schools so they can participate in these great programs.
Yeah, and Shawn is going to be busier than ever, and his staffers are going to be busier than ever, folks, because school choice in 2023, speaking as someone who's been involved in the pro-liberty movement, which has been promoting school choice since Milton Friedman in the 1950s, we have seen success this year, the likes of which we have never seen at the state legislative level, and we're going to get into the steps beyond legislation in a moment. But Arizona 2022, actually last year, the dam broke. There's full education ESA eligibility to every K through 12 student in Arizona. Earlier this year, Oklahoma, parents are going to be getting $7,500. Parents who opt into this system to pay for tuition for education alternatives. Universal, all students will be able to access this. Utah, ESA of $8,000 per year. It's going to be capped at $42 million, so I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Utah. I'm sure Shawn will be involved in that. His organization will be involved in that to lift the caps and truly make that universal. So that school choice revolution has touched our region of the country, the American Southwest. Shawn, your thoughts on this wonderful news, and it certainly extends beyond the American Southwest. School choice options proliferating at a rate we've never seen. What does that mean for you folks? And are you as thrilled as I am about this news? It's so rare that people who believe the things I believe about public policy have something to celebrate. But boy, do we have a lot to be pleased with lately.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a blessing for all those families to make, to get to make those choices. I always do caution this though. It is great that we're getting these initiatives passed, and the school choice train is rolling down the tracks. And I would say education choice, not just school choice anymore. Really giving parents, not just brick and mortar options, although I think a lot of them will use ESAs and tax credits and other things to attend great Catholic schools and brick and mortar. But but I think the bigger thing, the thing that kind of keeps me up at night now, and the thing that I want to really start working on is, we've passed all these great laws. We've got all these universal ones enacted. Hopefully, places like Georgia and Texas are going to follow soon as well. And then we'll kind of run into a little bit of a roadblock, I think, with tougher states like New York and California, that, are going to require a lot of work and probably more time. To me, the biggest thing the movement has to start working on, and I've seen some really great articles lately on this, and I've actually talked to my own board about this. We need to start working on implementation. It's great to have a wonderful program, but if families don't know about it, if families aren't accessing it, if families aren't using it to get, as I say, if butts aren't getting in the seats, then it's really pointless. And because that doesn't help a child. It doesn't help a child that you pass a law if the child doesn't get to access it, and if there's no desk for him or her to sit in, and his or her parent doesn't know about the program. We know this from some studies have come out. Only about 30 to 35% of parents even know that they live in a choice state.
Wow.
And so if they don't know that, they're not accessing the program, what good is it? So that's what the movement really needs to focus on. What we need to get some philanthropy behind. We need to come up with some good marketing. A rock star in this area is Father John Belmonte. He's a priest in Florida. He's the superintendent of the Diocese of Venice. I think I heard the number. When the school season opened, when the enrollment season opened, and they've got this great school choice in Florida. His diocese, his office sent out, I believe, over 1 million emails and tweets to Catholic families and others in his diocese, letting them know that all these school choice programs existed and that they were available for them. He's just a rock star. And we should be doing that for Catholics, we should be doing that in every single diocese in the country that has school choice. We should be letting families know that these exist, how to access them, how to help their families, and then we should be helping them with applications and getting on these programs. That is the real work that I believe is coming up. That's the important work that organizations like ours and others should be focused on now. And of course, keep trying to, get this for other states and for other children and families. But again, it's if you're in the desert and there's a glass of water, but you don't know the water's there, you're gonna suffer.
Definitely. There's a new paper out by the Manhattan Institute, which I haven't. I'm going to read it over the weekend, talking about what the next steps are. And there's a great quote just in the first part I looked at. Quote: resist the temptation to declare victory when a program is passed. There's so many more steps to come, and you sometimes that happens. I've been around. I'm more of a researcher than an activist, but you see that when activists get the big victory at city council or the state legislature, or they win a Supreme Court ruling, or they get legislation in Congress, and they just think, well, the war's over. Now the war is really beginning for education choice. I would say this is we've worked our way up to day one. Really, now the challenge is getting that doing it right. Now that we're able to do it, but for people who want to help get that word out about this, you were talking about, Shawn, is your organization, would they be a resource to help if people who want to give a donation or people who want to utilize their communication skills in order to get the word out?
Yeah, we certainly do. We've got a lot of information on our website, and also, we've got a lot of our good secular partners as well that have information about these. There's lots of great school choice out there. I would also say, contact your local private school, contact your local Catholic school or the diocesan schools office and ask, or your state Catholic conference if you're Catholic, and ask if you have these programs in your state, how to access them. There's so many resources out there, but we are gonna, we're gonna be getting into this. Utah is going to do a great. There's the group in Utah and the diocese there in Salt Lake. They're going to be starting a new program to really push this out, to let parents know about these things. So there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming down, but I think the movement is just kind of realizing, we can't get too far over our skis and getting all these passed. And then you get an Illinois situation, for example, where there's really there weren't enough kids on the program to actually save it. Illinois probably will be the first program in the history of school choice to go away because of legislative or gubernatorial action, not because of court action. And so part of that is because there just weren't enough kids on the program, and they didn't have the political advocacy and constituency to fight back to save their program. So, people need to get involved. They need to learn. There's lots of resources to learn if you live in a school choice state. And if you do, find out, get on the program. It's great for your kids, all these opportunities. But yes, we're going to be working on that and coming up with some things with a lot of national and local groups. So I would, stay tuned for that. But again, I think the wave happened so fast this last year that I think a lot of us were, some of us were caught a little bit flat-footed, like, wow, we had all these victories. Now what do we do? We kind of got the cavalry is kind of ahead of the army. And so we've got to figure that out.
Yeah, we didn't anticipate that problem 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, did we? That was
No.
a little bit of a surprise. Folks, if you want to weigh in again on your platform, make a comment, ask a question of our guest or Patrick or me. We are running a little low. We got the 3/4 of our discussion is over with, but I'm going to bring up some objections, and we're going to see what Shawn's reactions to those are. One from sort of the liberal left, and one from the libertarian side, which I'm more associated with, but I think it's a legitimate question to ask, but I don't think it's as strong a criticism as its supporters think. The liberal left is in high dudgeon about this issue of, and our guest is perfect for this because he's representing Catholic schools in our country, which are a big part, but not the only part of private education. I mean, it comes in so many other forms, including homeschooling, which is hyper individualized because it's mom and dad doing their task. Shawn, the question, the criticism leveled is this will be this is introducing theocracy to the United States. That Jeffersonian line of distinction between church and state is being broken. I have a wonderful tweet that Corey DeAngelis, the school choice evangelist, always issues on every other day practically in terms of money flowing to religious organizations for other reasons. But I'd be interested in your take on that, blurring the line. It seems to be one of the chief objections to that. People who maybe they don't like the Catholic Church, but maybe they're being fully honest, and saying they just don't want any money going to a religious entity. What is Catholic Education's partners' response to that charge?
Well, I would say, first one is a very high level constitutional principle. And I remind people, we have an establishment clause. We don't have a separation clause. So Jefferson, so to take Jefferson's quote or his words, he was saying that to protect the religious in our country, the religious organizations, the faithful. He wasn't saying that because, poor, weak government needed to be protected from religious folks. So we have to remember that it was not to protect the government; it was to protect the individual and the religious organizations. Also, again, we have an establishment clause, not a separation clause, and that basically just says that Congress shall not establish one state religion, as long as these programs are open to any group of faith or not. You could have a secular private school that has no faith connection. As long as we don't just favor, if you had a program that just said, okay, only Catholic schools can get school choice money, I'd have no argument for you that violates the establishment clause. But again, it's open to all these. We also do this in a lot of other government programs. We have funded, the government has funded and given money to Catholic hospitals, Catholic charities, other religious charities, other religious-based hospitals, adoption agencies, homeless shelters, all kinds of things. It only seems that oftentimes the left gets concerned that, there might be public money somehow flowing. And let's remember, it flows to the parent. It doesn't flow directly to the school. But they only get worried about it where all of a sudden you might be teaching, religion or teaching things that are contrary to what you might learn in public school. They never seem to worry that, that we're housing the homeless or feeding the hungry or taking care of the sick. That's money flowing to religious organizations. So, let's not be hypocritical here. And again, the Supreme Court has ruled consistently over and over and over with many cases from, Espinosa to Carson to, cases back in the 50s, that this money does not violate the Establishment Clause. It does not violate the spirit of separation of church and state. And so, the highest court in the land, many state courts, many municipal and district courts have ruled on this. So I just say that, I'm not an attorney, but the courts have ruled on this, and they've said you cannot actually discriminate based on religion in these programs.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to make that, just to reiterate what you said in terms of the parents are the ones making the determination. I mean, they qualify for the ESA, the voucher, whatever and then they can go out into the marketplace and decide whatever they want. And it's really
Yeah.
not government's business beyond that. And the list of programs that Corey DeAngelis lists, and it'd be very interesting to see people on the left backtrack and say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to maintain my position on school choice, and then I'm going to advocate for the government to not be involved in these other issues." I'm not holding my breath on that. Pell Grants, the GI Bill, pre-K schools, the Head Start program, food stamps, WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children's Program, Medicaid, Medicare, Section 8 housing, all of these expenses, these subsidies that originate in the government and then flow through the individual beneficiary or recipient. There are quasi-religious or explicitly religious entities engaged in all of these programs, providing all these different types of services. So, to my friends on the liberal left, I would say I look forward to you advocating the end of Medicaid and Medicare and food stamps and all these other programs if you want to be consistent when it comes to school choice. But again, I'm not holding my breath. Now, here's the objection from my people, the libertarian movement, the sort of Lou Rockwell types, and we have many anarcho-capitalists and Austrians and all those sorts of good people, and I agree with them on most everything. But I don't find this argument quite as convincing as they make it. And this was referenced in the Manhattan Institute paper that was recently released. Some private and especially some faith-based schools are wary of participating in these education choice programs because of the specter of potential regulations that might come with public funding. And I'm going to ask Shawn for his perspective on that, because I do think it's a thoughtful criticism, and it's a legitimate criticism. But I think once you unpack it, it's not as profound as the people making it maybe think it is.
Yeah, and I would even say, no, I think it's definitely a concern. I know it's a concern that some of our bishops have, and it's legitimate to be concerned about that, because oftentimes, and we've seen in adoption, the areas of adoption, now with hospitals and transgender surgeries and performing double mastectomies on 12-year-old girls and crazy stuff, and saying, well, if you're a Catholic hospital that receives government funding, you have to do these things. I would say this: part of what we do is you have to be vigilant. Part of our work is in these coalitions. I helped write the religious liberty language for the West Virginia bill. That language has been used in Utah. It's been used in other states now in their programs. You have to write protective language in the bill, in the program, that protects the school, that protects them from teaching their creed, admissions, hiring and firing, curriculum, all these things. You have to be vigilant constantly. The other thing I will say is this, though, and I have said this to many Catholic school principals and superintendents and others that are concerned. And again, I don't belittle their concerns. It's a concern. But here's the thing. As we know, any state government at any time can pass laws being restrictive on religious organizations. A lot of them haven't done it yet. But there's nothing preventing, even if a school doesn't ever receive a dime through a parent or directly, there's nothing stopping a very progressive legislature and governor from imposing things on religious schools in their state. You could easily say, if you don't use this curriculum, you cannot operate in X state. If you don't, if you refuse to hire this kind of person, you cannot operate in our state. You cannot be a legal entity. So again, be vigilant, get the protections in the law. Never, ever assume that those are enshrined permanently in stone. You have to fight to keep them, fight to protect them. But the state could pass all kinds of stuff on religious organizations, as it has in other countries. So you're never safe.
That's a good point, and I think we agree on the validity of the fear, but also not overstating it as well. We are desperately low on time, folks. I'm going to give Shawn kind of a final pitch for a group of people and Shawn mentioned this earlier, and I just from my own experience, one of my dear friends Pete, one of my dear friends Greg, and my Catholic high school were from Protestant families. Obviously, there could be a lot of interest from Catholics to send their children to Catholic education, but as the options proliferate, as people start to, I think, finally break through this ossified government system where you just send your kid to the local school, the local public school, and the options are proliferating, whether it's homeschooling or Baptist school or Montessori school or Waldorf school or Catholic school. Shawn, why should someone who maybe doesn't know about Catholicism, maybe he was raised in a family where the adults told him Catholics were bad people. I mentioned earlier in the show that I think the profound effect that the Catholic education's focus on the ethical dilemmas of society, and whether you're listening to the angel or the devil on your shoulder every morning. I think that probably did more for me than any aspect of my Catholic education, and I hopefully live it out to the day. To the non-Catholics out there who are starting to wake up and starting to look at their options, they may be tempted to just brush that Catholic option aside. And I'll reiterate, the Southwest Public Policy Institute is not a Catholic organization. We just want people to be fully informed and avail themselves of these wonderful education options that are proliferating. What would be your 3-minute elevator pitch or 90-second elevator pitch to non-Catholic parents that they should really go down and visit and talk to the administrators and talk to the teachers and maybe sit in on a class and find out if Catholic education might be right for their kids?
Well, yeah, no, I think, part of it is just history. I think look at our education record. And when I say education record, I don't just mean test scores. I don't just mean grades or college attainment. All those things are really important. And that's what, when people look at a school, they want to make sure that a child's getting a good education. But yes, definitely visit, talk to your neighbors and your friends, your brother-in-law, whatever, that might attend Catholic school or that did, or that send their kids somewhere. But we have a beautiful record in this country of providing, as a minority group, providing a wonderful education. And I always say we took a lot of immigrants, very poor immigrants from Ireland and Poland and Germany and all over the world. We took them from the boat at Ellis Island to the boardroom in one generation. And we did that because we offered them a really good, solid education. But more importantly, we offered them, a moral framework and that transcends, that is for the common good. And so, I think that is so important today, as all the craziness and all the dumpster fires are going on around, in the United States today, to give us a shot, check us out, look at our education record, look at other things. But I'm proud of Catholic education in this country, starting in the 1800s up until today. So I'm happy to put that record against any other form of education in this country. And I think if people really look at it, don't listen to the the myths and the Catholic schools are they're discriminatory and all this kind of. Look at the actual record. Catholic schools, long before public schools were forced to by the Supreme Court, we were integrating. We were teaching African American children, often sometimes in violation of the law in the South. We were taking those children in to educate them. And I always say, we always say this, you've probably heard this line: we don't educate children because they're Catholic. We educate them because we're Catholic. Because we care about the individual child and we want to give them a good, solid education, but also a moral underpinning so that they can contribute to the common good, to society, and to their fellow man. And, if that's something that at least on the face of it sounds attractive to you, check out your local Catholic school. There are lots of options, and give us a chance.
Absolutely. And I'll just end with a very brief personal story. A couple days ago, I was at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, on the site of the spot where Dr. King was assassinated, and it was actually on Juneteenth, so it was a pretty big day in Memphis that day as I was coming back across from the east to the southwest of the United States. And I stopped to listen to the 1963 speech, maybe the best piece of oration in recorded American history. I mean, it's just a magnificent speech, and I don't know that anyone in America, conservative, liberal, libertarian, could disagree with really any of a word of it. But what Dr. King said at the end was, we look forward to that day when we can allow freedom ring. And of course, he starts when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics mentioned in that third grouping in his speech. I think it reveals a lot about American history, that there was a time when Catholics weren't too welcome here, and they ended up building an amazing education system that is still with us. It may not have the 5 or 6 million people it did 40 or 50 years ago, but it is still here. And I think school choice options are gonna help preserve that education. Thank you so much, Shawn. We really appreciate you coming in, folks. Thanks for tuning in to SPPI-TV. We are the Southwest Public Policy Institute. Check us out at southwestpolicy.com. We want to keep these weekly broadcasts free, so it would help if a little, clams or dough or shekels were kicked our way. We are a nonprofit organization. Our goal is to keep what is so good, and there is so much good about our region of the country. The best region of the country are our 8 states down here in the Southwest, and we want to fix what's wrong and continue to let our region act as a beacon of hope and opportunity for our country, but we can't do it without your help. Thanks, folks. Check us out again, southwestpolicy.com. We will be back next Friday. Thanks so much. And I'm back after my extended vacation, and I will be back with you again a week from today. Thanks for joining us, and visit us online, southwestpolicy.com. Thank you.